You're watching the Action Sports Jax 24/7 network. Now it's time for the Brent Austen Show.
Hey, Jets, Josh Hines, Allen, right there, coming off Nissan Stadium's field. A little different than it was in January when the Jaguars collapsed to lose 5 out of 6 and missed the playoffs. At least this one a little bit happier in Nashville. Still a December to really not celebrate. But for Josh Hines, Allen, he got a chance to do that with all the fans, and that was kind of a fun moment for them. A good amount of fans that were there at Nissan Stadium, as always, in Nashville. But overall, pretty quiet crowd for two teams that don't look like they're going anywhere anytime soon. Jags get the win 10-6. It's a victory Monday. Haven't been able to say that and smile around Jacksonville for almost a couple of months. October 20th was the last time the Jags won a football game. By the way, that was at Wembley Stadium against the New England Patriots in London. Last time they won in Jacksonville, week 5, I think it was October 6th was the date. So those are the ugly numbers, but a win is a win, Austin Lane. So let's take it. And your defensive unit got the job done this time around.
Let's go, man. Defensive unit. Brent, I mean, they say revenge is always sweet, and it's a dish best served cold. And when we talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars knocking out the Tennessee Titans of playoff contention, I mean, come on, Brent. Talking about a team that was rolling a little bit in talking about a team that was the Tennessee Titans that were still in playoff contention, and you knocked them out. I guess I'll take it.
I guess so. That's where we're at, right, this season. What an interesting game. Listen, there are a couple of things that are going on here, and I didn't know how Jags fans felt about the whole draft thing with 5 games to go. And then after the game yesterday, I started to get more of that. Like, oh, great, they even screw that up. I'm like, are we already on the draft counter? Really? Like, come on, people. I mean, here's the deal. The Jags are better than probably every team they're going to play the rest of the way. Jets are actually playing a little bit better, but still can't win. So they're going to win some of these games. Like, they were not going to just win 2 games, I think, down the stretch, even with Trevor Lawrence out, in my opinion. Tennessee is a terrible football team. The Jets are not a good team. The Raiders are not a good team. And we'll see what happens with a team like the Colts. So I was never thinking number 1 overall pick. In fact, everybody has the Jags at number 1. The NFL research shows that the Jags actually had the 3rd pick going into that game because right now they lose tiebreakers on strength of schedule, at least with the notes that we got. So I think a lot of people think the Jags are in the number 1 spot. I think they were actually in the number 3 spot going into that game, and now they go down to 5. I mean, don't we want to get out of – is that just us that's been talking about getting out of that number 1 overall pick? We don't want that. And you never want this, by the way, Austin. You never want to play for the pick. And I'm with you on this one at least because I think the Jags winning football games and just finding a way to not be the worst team in the league this year actually has some importance to it.
No, absolutely. Because the last thing you want to, be in the ballpark and is saying, okay, this is the 3rd first-round pick in 5 years. That's not something that you want to be associated with. That's embarrassing as a franchise. So, yeah, I don't want to be associated with that number 1. I get where the fan base is upset, right? Because we always think that, the number 1 overall pick is going to be the difference maker. And, yeah, we've had a couple of them. We've had Trevor Lawrence. We've had Trayvon Walker. And to be fair, yeah, has it made a difference a little bit? Sure, there was a nice little run a couple years ago, but overall, not so much of a difference where we're still maybe picking first again. And at the end of the day, and I've been very adamant about this, I don't want them to take Travis Hunter. I think Travis Hunter can bring a lot of new eyes to a football team. I think he can bring definitely a new fan base to a football team. I think he's a dynamic special player. I just don't think the Jaguars can use him properly. So I don't want to go through those mental gymnastics. I would rather pick a sure thing. We put him at 1 spot and say, go play this spot and go win us some football games. So truth be told, I'm actually happy that they're out of that top spot right now.
Yeah, and I actually think they're going to win at least another game. I mean, they'll beat Tennessee, I think, at home, too. Tennessee's really bad. They'll probably win the Raiders game or the Jets game. I don't know which one. And we'll see about Indy. Indy might be playing for something, and we'll see how the Jags are at that point. But, yeah, I'm not going to be surprised if they win another one. They might end up picking like 8th or 9th in this draft. Who really knows? Depends on what the other teams do as well. Every team's capable. I mean, look at what Carolina's doing here, the last few weeks. That's a clear sign that every team is capable. I saw it. I don't know where I saw this. I think it was on Twitter yesterday, and I thought it was a pretty good point. Somebody's like, hey, look what they did in the draft this year. They've got Brian Thomas Jr. He's one of the best draft picks in the first round at number 23. He's playing better than maybe, just about anybody in the National Football League that was drafted in the first round or drafted for that matter. And they have 3 wins. So, you can sit there and want these picks. And I'll give you one more to that. Trevor Lawrence, we don't think was a bad pick at number 1 overall. Trayvon Walker, not a bad pick at number 1 overall. And they still are in this kind of situation. And I thought the point of whoever said that, sorry, I can't give him credit right now, but just triggered my mind. It's deeper than talent, all right? I mean, we think the Jags actually have some talent. The way to fix this is beyond the talent part of it. Sure, you got to get more of it. You got to do more of it, but you've got to coach it better. You've got to culture it better. You've got to figure out all those kind of things. So I'm just not on the draft pick thing. 1, because I figured the Jags were going to win a couple of these games down the stretch. And 2, I don't want the embarrassment of it. And 3, I do think it's important for these guys to win. I mean, whether it was Trevor at the helm or now Mac, they need to win. I mean, they have lost way too much around here, and just finding that winning feeling, scratching out, I don't know, maybe you get the 5 wins. I'm not even a big fan of momentum. I'm not trying to say that. Just stop being a perennial loser in the basement, at least just middle in the, or get in the middle of the draft order, get in the middle of the rest of the NFL where nobody's talking about you for the next few months, Austin, and just say, okay, we didn't have a good year. Now we're going to try to reboot it next season. I mean, that's fine by me. I either want to be in the playoffs or you want to have a high draft pick most years. That's not it for me this year. They're going to have to get a good player no matter where they pick. But I'd rather people not talking about all offseason how bad the Jags are again.
No, without a doubt. And you say pick, I mean, it's, put a little asterisk, it's picks, right? Because in the first round, yeah, they've done pretty well and everything. But if you look at this past season's draft class, and yeah, Brian Thomas Jr., arguably, if not maybe the best first rounder so far. I mean, obviously Neighbors has something to say about it as well. I mean, there's a couple talented guys in the first round, but Brian Thomas Jr. is right up there. And yeah, they've only won 3 games this season. But then when you look at the second round, when you look at the third round pick, now Jay and Jones, he's starting to flash a little bit. He's starting to make a little more name for of himself. But like Mason Smith, it's been kind of in and out of the lineup. Javon Foster, Jordan Jefferson, DeAndre Prince, there's a lot of guys here. And Cam Little obviously is getting his run right now, but there's a lot of guys who we haven't really seen. And especially going into that game as a 2-win team, not coming out a 3-win team, usually when that happens, you see more younger guys get a lot more playing time, and you see them showcased a little more, and we haven't really seen that all season so far.
Hey guys, I got something for you. Just kind of, isn't it weird to not feel angry on a Monday morning? This has been a weird year. All the different stuff. Trevor last week, and you name it, Doug, and I mean, just every week it's something. The Lions, every single week it's something. And it's just kind of a little bizarre last night and even today to not be the fan base just not all fired up. I think in part it gave them something to get fired up about is the draft pick, but there's not enough emotion in that one. Pretty weird not to be slamming mad coming in here on a Monday morning.
Yeah, man. I mean, I didn't have to even watch the press conferences or anything. I'm just all right, you guys celebrate a W, have a safe flight back, and we'll talk about it on Monday.
Hamby, you okay? I mean, you're not mad about anything, Hamby. I mean, you got everything going on right now. I mean, you're not even mad about Juan Soto going to the Mets in the NL East because you got Georgia winning an SEC championship. You got Alabama knocked out of it. You got Scott Frost coming back home to Orlando. And you're not even afraid of Juan Soto. You're so blinded, you're not even afraid of Juan Soto.
Hamby, are you celebrating Alabama being out of it?
I'm more so celebrating Miami being left out of it.
I got
I don't know about. I mean, look, Bama, I'll take. I mean, we did beat them, but they still have our number. So, of the other 11 teams, I'm probably scared of Alabama more than anybody if we had to play them. So, yeah, good for them to be out. But yeah, I'm so blinded by the winning and obviously the Jags, and have almost mushed my brain with how different this one feels that I'm pumped a little bit, just a little bit, that Juan Soto is now a Met, because I feel like it's going to cement them into the oblivion of mediocrity in jail, 3 times what Deshaun Watson and the Browns were going through. And I know Juan Soto has 0 off the field issues, so not in that comparison, but they're completely handcuffed, and they're going to be completely handcuffed. And when they come in second and third in the NL East for years to come, and they still have to pay him $50 to $60 million a year, even when he's 43, I'm going to be laid back in my lazy boy and clapping all along.
We'll get into the Juan Soto stuff. That's a heck of a deal. I'm not sure I agree with everything you just said there, but I'm glad you do to make you feel better. We'll get into a little bit of Scott Frost coming back home. That's an interesting hire. Why'd they do it? What happened to Scott Frost? He kind of like went off the planet, it felt like, for a little bit after Nebraska. We talk about the college football playoff. TaxSlayer Gator Bowl really doesn't get what they want, but I think they got a pretty decent game, quite frankly, but not exactly what they wanted. And seems like it's nothing new. It's a little bit of a theme for the TaxSlayer Gator Bowl in the last decade or so. A lot around the NFL as well, including those dang Chiefs, man. I mean, they need a break once in a while, and I'm glad they were able to get it. But it's good for them that they just keep winning. How about Josh Allen? Shoot, man, that dude is insane right now, and they still lose the football game. But a little bit more on this game. I mean, I know there's not like crazy stuff to dissect, guys, on this game. I mean, it was a pretty good defensive effort. Will Levis missed a couple of touchdowns. He got a couple of goal line stands. The Calvin Ridley stuff is kind of fascinating. The fan base is having some fun with that. But I'm going to probably come out of the gates with something that might surprise you. And I wonder how you feel about this, Austin. You look at the scoreboard and you get 10 points and you're like, man, this offense, once again, they can't score in the first half. They just can't finish or get points on the board. And then the fourth quarter, they scored 30 points in the last 2 weeks, and 24 of them have come in the fourth quarter. For whatever reason, they're figuring it out a little bit. They did go hurry up a little bit the late third quarter to start that drive. They got Brian Thomas Jr. the ball. We'll talk about that. But I'm going to say something that might surprise you. I actually thought the offense played a lot better than the 10 points. I thought the offense did a pretty nice job throughout the day, in fact. And I know that sounds weird because they weren't scoring, but they started on the 25-yard line, the 11-yard line, the 8-yard line, the 2-yard line, and the 18-yard line to start. And I know my expectations are not super high, but that's just based off what I've watched with this offense recently. And they did a good job to get the ball off those distances or that field position, move it out to maybe midfield, either flip the field or then eventually sustain a drive, or even where Mac had the interceptions, were in an okay part of the field if you're going to throw an interception. Now, one was right at the end of the half, so that really didn't matter. But the other one was on like the 35-yard line or something of Tennessee. That's kind of where you want to make a mistake if you're going to make a mistake. One, it's not deep in your own end. And two, you're not getting points off the board necessarily, because I think that was like a 3rd and 15. They were probably going to have to punt. So they lost field position a little bit, but it wasn't the worst spot. So Austin, I actually thought the offense did a better job than it looks like. They went 5 for 7 on third downs, 5 of their first 7, which has been such a problem for them, but they were able to move the ball out, completed some big 3rd and 10s. I thought Mac evaded the pocket at times pretty well to make things happen. So am I an idiot for thinking that? But I thought the offense played a little bit better than the 10 points that showcased the board.
I mean, I take it you didn't watch the Bills and the Chiefs and the Chargers and the Rams play yesterday, because those are some offenses that were showcased yesterday, and then you had the Jags-Titans game. I mean, the offense played good enough to win. I'll give you that much, but Mac Jones had 2 pretty bad interceptions that, you really can't have. They couldn't really run the ball, I feel like they wanted to. The emergence of Tank Bigsby kind of helped them out a little bit, but even his average wasn't that good. I think once they started implementing in the second half Brian Thomas Jr., then they started to get a little more momentum. And this was in the playbook that we talked about on Friday, where you got to find a way to get Brian Thomas Jr. the ball in space, because he's so quick and he's so deceiving, where even if it's a little 5-yard out or whatever you want to run, he can get open and he can make big plays happen. So once they started force-feeding Brian Thomas Jr. the ball, I thought the offense looked a lot different. But overall, I thought it was it better? Sure, but you still turned the ball over. You still had problems running the ball. But at the end of the day, the most important stat is you won.
Yeah, and listen, you're not wrong. All those things add up. I'm not trying to tell you that the Jags offense is the Rams or the Bills. I'm just trying to look at what the offense has been. And they can't get third. If the Jags lose that football game, if they do what they've been doing the last month on offense, which means they can't get first downs. And because if you don't get a first down on your own 8-yard line or on your own 2-yard line, you're basically giving them the football in field goal range. And so I thought there was just a little bit of game within a game there that was better than would probably jump out at you at the scoreboard because of what the score said, 10-6, just a horrendous offensive game. And listen, these two teams are not great offensively. I mean, they're just not. Should they be better? Maybe, but they're just not. And I thought there was just some better stuff there than again, will jump out at you. The third downs are huge. I mean, that third down is a big thing that we've been talking about. I think after that, they ended up maybe like 6 for 13, I think the stats might say. So they started off 5 for 7 and then got a little slow. The funny thing is they actually scored their points once they started not getting the third down conversions. They did get the big 4th and 1, and then they just got into a rhythm where they didn't need to because they were getting the ball to Brian Thomas Jr. And I don't know where you process that part of it, Austin, the Brian Thomas Jr. stuff. But I had a tweet during the game, and I think my math was right. I did it pretty quick. But it was a 34-play span where he had no catches to start the game. Now, they tried to get him the ball a couple of times. It just didn't connect. They also had the ball on that reverse to him, but then he handed it off. That went for -7 yards. So the next 18 plays, when they got cooking a bit, for them, got cooking, 8 catches in 18 plays.
Yeah, I got it pulled up. First 34, 0. Last 18, 8. You had it.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. What it does there is it showcases two things. And Doug said this, hey, we got to get him the ball, right? We got to start getting, well, why does it take so long for that? And you wonder about scheme and how you scheme guys open and what happens. Remember about a month ago when they were saying, well, we couldn't get him the ball because they were doing this and that. Well, yeah, you can. I mean, these were very simple plays that they were getting the football. It wasn't these 15, 18, 25-yard plays down the field. It was just quick little, hey, go win the route along the sideline and let's just keep the chains moving. It obviously proves they can get him the football, Austin.
No, without a doubt. And I think sometimes, coaches, they just, an offensive-minded coach or a coordinator, they just want to take what the defense gives them. And I understand that. And we even saw that with Justin Jefferson yesterday, where Addison was having the game for a while just because, if they're going to double-team Jefferson and focus all their attention on Jefferson, all right, you have to go different directions. And maybe sometimes that's what happens with the Jaguars as well, where if I'm a defensive coordinator and I'm playing the Jaguars, yeah, I'm going to let Mac Jones try to beat me on these little short passes the whole time. I'm not going to give up a big shot, a long ball to Brian Thomas Jr., So maybe sometimes it's about, taking what the defense gives you. Okay. But at the end of the day, you saw it for yourself. Once they started force feeding Brian Thomas Jr., the offense looked different. They looked a little more like, they're on point. They looked a little more in terms of timing and everything. They were a well-oiled machine. And that's all due to Brian Thomas Jr. So, yeah, I think going forward, sure, if they double team, whatever the case may be, great players can get open regardless. And if they can't, then you scheme them open. And hopefully now going forward, they do that for Brian Thomas Jr.
Well, how much did that game also showcase that Brian Thomas Jr. is such a good break for the Jags to not get Calvin Ridley? That is our Everbank game plan, by the way. You got one more week to get into the Shadows contest. Make sure you check it out with Everbank. The game plan was simple. Get him the football more. The running game hasn't been working. You're on your backup quarterback. You can get Evan Ingram the ball. I think you can get Brent Strange the football a little bit more. Parker Washington's been a little up and down, but you can get Brian Thomas Jr. the football. And again, remember, if you go back to March, everybody around Jacksonville, including on our show, we're curious. All right, what's going on with Calvin Ridley? The Jags seem to want Calvin Ridley. Well, they didn't franchise tag Josh Hines-Allen. So because of that, they didn't come to a deal with Josh Hines-Allen. So because of that, they couldn't franchise tag Calvin Ridley and keep him around for another year. Well, then Tennessee comes out with this 4-year, $90-something million deal. Like, holy cow, no way you were going to pay him that kind of money. The Jags got a huge break. Like, you look at breaks on the moves that don't happen sometimes, what a break, because they end up manipulating the draft very well. They get Brian Thomas Jr., and we know what Brian Thomas Jr. is. He's about to set all the rookie records for the Jags in franchise history with 4 games to go, having a terrific year so far, helped win that game, and it was on display there, the difference between him and Calvin Ridley just right now. We thought that might be a play for down the road. It's right now, Austin. He's already a better player, in my opinion, a more consistent player than Calvin Ridley. You'd rather have him on the team, and then Calvin makes the big blunder by not turning the ball up the field on that third down late in the game.
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, it was kind of poetic justice, I guess, if you want to say it, with that play out of bounds. I mean, I don't know how many, because it seemed like all his momentum was going towards out of bounds. Like, I know he was mad at himself for that play, but to be able to stop, literally, like, you want to say stop on a dime, that was like stop on a penny and then try to, like, work your way up. I mean, I'm not sure how many wide receivers could do that. Once again, it's poetic justice for the Jaguars. But, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think anybody would tell you right now, whether you're a fantasy fan or whether you watch football, like, you would much rather have Brian Thomas Jr. than Calvin Ridley. And guess what? You got Brian Thomas Jr. on a rookie contract compared to what Calvin Ridley's making. So the Jaguars definitely won that trade-off, if you will. And it looks like you're going to have a staple, you're going to have a pillar on your team now for years and years to come in Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah, and again, there was some. Remember when this all transpired? The thing that we liked about it, if they weren't going to get Calvin Ridley, before we even knew who the Jags were going to get, right? We wondered if they would trade up for a Neighbors or a Marvin Harrison Jr. or whoever. Who's the other one I'm missing? Who's the other receiver? Odunze, sorry, with Chicago. We wondered if they might make a move up. We even wondered, would they go get a guy like Bowers, which might not have been a bad move too, but the Jags haven't figured out how to use two tight ends. They already have two tight ends we think they could use, and they don't do that in this offense. But so that intrigued us. If you go all the way back to the draft conversation, well, then the fourth guy, if you sit put, who can you get? I think the Jags were picking 17 to start. You can get Brian Thomas Jr. Well, they trade back. They end up getting him at number 23 and really did a nice job to manipulate that part of the draft and still end up with the guy. A lot of people like Brian Thomas Jr., but there were always also questions about him. But what we liked about that whole scenario, even before they took BTJ, was the money part of it, the youth part of it. Calvin Ridley is a 30-year-old guy that even if you go 2 years with Ridley, you wonder what you're going to get in year number 2. We also, if we're being honest, we're like, hey, Calvin Ridley coming back and the continuity of this offense isn't a bad thing. Like, that could be a good thing for Trevor in this offense. So we don't want to sit here and say we were never on the Ridley train. You could just see the financial part of it, the logic part of it, the future part of it, that you go get a 22-year-old player instead of a 31-year-old player. And now you've got Trevor Lawrence in this guy for the next handful of years at the very least, much like a Burrow, Jamar Chase, all those kind of situations. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it's played out. I mean, it really has. I mean, outside of the Trevor part, because Trevor's been in and out of the lineup. But the bottom line is what he has shown is that Brian Thomas Jr. is a really good player. And the star potential that he has is there. I mean, I don't know where he's going in his career. I don't want to put any labels on him. I just think it's pretty obvious when you talk to players in that locker room, Austin, like, this dude is the real deal. And he's got a very bright future, just the way he goes about his business and what he's already been able to do, and really what they've missed on. Remember, there were 2 games where they hardly threw it to him. And also last week, he could have had a 200-yard game easy if the quarterbacks could get him the football. So it might only get better from here for Brian Thomas Jr. is the point.
Yeah, you would hope so, right? And we talk about this all the time in what makes a franchise quarterback, what makes an elite quarterback. And it's having that true number one receiver. And I think for the first couple of years of Trevor's career, he hasn't had that. And we saw the glimpses of it. We saw the infancy of it this year. Now you hope that once again Trevor can come back healthier after that surgery and everything. Brian Thomas Jr. can only get more explosive, more deadly with a year under his belt, and you're gonna have that combination for a long time to come. I'm not saying it's the difference between going to a Super Bowl or not, but I think it's a difference between being an okay offense and being an elite offense. And once again, having an elite quarterback, you need an elite wide receiver.
Hamby, I know you got some sound from Doug Peterson and Mac Jones about Brian Thomas Jr. I don't know if it's all together, if we got to go to them separately, but let's hear from those guys post-game talking about number 7.
Yeah, we tried earlier in the game to do some things that way. Tennessee took a couple of those options, away, and we just, we didn't get into a rhythm. But, it's what we got to do, right? We got to get Brian involved, and he's such a dynamic, young, first-year receiver that is he's a great player. I mean, he's a great player. He's going to be a really good player in this league. And for he and Mac to make that play, it's kind of a broken play, scramble, that really got us down there. And just I think that was we scored the touchdown on that drive. Just great awareness by those two. But BT is just a solid player that continues to improve each week.
Yeah, I think just as the game went on, he did a good job getting open. He was open all game, but I just kind of have to give him the ball earlier and let him settle in. As a rookie, I've been there. You want to get some catches, get going, feeling good, and all the other guys too. Like they're making plays and running backs and Tank on that touchdown and stuff. So we just got to find a way to be a little bit more consistent. But like I said, we didn't roll over and quit this time, and that's important.
Austin?
Who are you laughing at? You laughing at Doug ain't saying solid, but he did say
No.
great.
What do you think I'm laughing at?
Brent.
You laughing at
Come
the
on,
coach.
man. Huh?
No, he's not laughing at the
What
coach.
do you
He's laughing at the turtleneck.
Thank you, Hamby. Hey. It's a little aggressive. Do you remember when
Joe Burrow wears a turtleneck? You guys love it.
Hey,
Joe Burrow
should be in the MVP conversation right now if it wasn't for a mediocre defense. Mac Jones threw 2 interceptions yesterday to a bunch of secondary guys I've never heard of before. So let's keep things in perspective. What are we talking about? You ever see Brent, you, probably not. Hamby, you ever see the Addams Family? Addams Family Values?
The new one, or like the animated, or the old one?
No, the old one. Addams Family Values, where Uncle Pester rocks a turtleneck and the wig. Yeah, that's exactly what. Not saying he's wearing a wig or anything, but the turtleneck and the kind of like the oversized coat. It's a look. It's a choice, Mac Jones. It's a choice.
You gotta have a lot of confidence to do that.
It's a choice.
Mac did. Listen, Doug, first of all, that's about as high a praise as Doug will say about a player. And then he went back and dialed it down to solid. But when he said he's going to be a great player in this league, like seriously, it's one of the things I've said. I think I've said it on the show before, but I've really said behind closed doors about Doug is Doug does not go over the top praise about anybody because he's seen such good around the NFL. Like he's been around great quarterbacks and other players, and he's been from Andy Reid. So his standard is so high for what actually is good in the NFL. And for him to say what he said about Brian Thomas Jr., that's like gushing about a player, quite frankly. Like that really is. And then he dialed it back a little bit toward the end. And I also thought the play that he's talking about, the play where Mac does a nice job to get out of the pocket now. And I also thought Mac had some great transparency and vulnerability in that post-game press conference where he was like, I really could have stayed in the pocket. Like the pocket was fine. And he's like, I got to do a better job getting him the ball early. Like he really put a lot on him. It was kind of a refreshing way to hear some of the things that he was saying. But on that specific play, to get out of the pocket and for Brian Thomas Jr. to leak out, and I'm thinking, okay, across the league, maybe everybody does this. But do you remember the last time like a broken play like went that way for the Jags? Like it worked. It wasn't a throwaway. It wasn't somebody like just missed, stumbled over their feet, dropped the ball. Like that's a play that you look around the league. You watch last night at these games and you're like, yeah, that happens, right? A little nuanced play that they go backyard and it works. Guys, we haven't seen those plays work for the Jags in like a calendar year. And I thought that was a pretty significant play for those guys to connect on. It turns out it was a 31-yard play that set up the Tank Bigsby touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, it's genius when something can come together like that, right? When a plan comes together. And I think a lot of the things, Brent, that we've seen with this offense this year, it's, the defense takes something away and you have no answer for it, right? And maybe we saw that a little bit in the first half, but once again, it comes down to having those key adjustments. And yeah, we can say in the fourth quarter the Jaguars are scoring points. A lot of that, I think, is more just garbage time. Now, they've been in some close games, but I think a lot of it is their opponent, when they take their foot off the gas and play a little more conservative, that allows the Jaguars offense to kind of, do their thing a little more in the second half. Well, we saw a team, and thankfully this finally happened, where maybe things weren't rolling like you wanted. You're not really scoring points. And then you make the halftime adjustments. You say, let's get Brian Thomas Jr. the ball, which is funny, too, because ironically, if you go back and watch the game during the halftime interview, when Doug's walking off the field, he says, we have to pound the rock more. We have to run the ball more. So I'm like, okay, well, here comes a giant dose of Tank Bigsby for a nail-biting 6-3 type of game or something. But it didn't turn out like that. You started implementing Brian Thomas Jr. a little more. So it is refreshing to see, you start game planning a little more, start scheming players open.
Hamby, the interesting thing for me in that game is how many times, let's just take the fourth quarter, I guess, but how many, not just the fourth, how many times yesterday can you remember a play the Jags made and it was like, oh, that was a big play in the game? I mean, go to Trayvon Walker on first down at the goal line. He clotheslines a dude who was, by the way, that hole was wide open. Like he was walking into the end zone. And you're kind of sitting there like, hey, that's a great play. That's a violent play by Trayvon, but okay, they're going to score in the next couple of plays anyway. Well, they don't, right? So and then you got the end of the game situation where Ridley messes up and like, okay, well, they'll get a first down on this play on fourth. No, they don't. They make the mistake. Will Levis is the one that made the mistake. He missed a wide open guy in the end zone on the previous one I was talking about. And then you get a play like this, Brian Thomas Jr. You don't just settle for a field goal. Tank Bigsby actually breaks it into the end zone and scores. Like, these are just plays. I know this is like normal stuff that happens in the NFL. It has not happened for the Jags this year. Like, it is like, holy cow. Like, those are plays that you win the football game with. And the Jags just have not had like any of that go right in the fourth quarter of these games, where they are now, I think, 2-8 in one-score games this season.
I mean, you hit it on the head. I mean, even the Brenton Strange 21-yard catch seemed big for me at the time, because it was like, all right, finally we're up out of our own end and we can kind of do some more things, because we were kind of backed up at that point. And he got us, I believe, over past midfield. But the other thing I wanted to point out with Mac is he talked about wanting to stay in the pocket more, right? And there was times in the first half where he just kind of tucked it and ran. Almost immediately, and I can even see the halftime adjustment there, because he could have, if he would have done what he did in the first half on the BTJ long catch, he would have tucked it and ran and tried to, I guess, get back to the line or make Arden-Key miss or something like that. But he obviously keeps his eyes downfield, and BTJ escapes or sneaks out and he hits him. Like, I even saw that adjustment. So that was good, because I think it happened. It seemed like 3 or 4 times in the first half, where it wasn't just a tuck and try to evade, but it was a tuck and scramble way too early. It was just another big play, like you said, that they made.
Yeah, by the way, that front's pretty good for Tennessee. And I would see Mac being a little bit quicker in his processing, because Anton Harrison goes out before the game because he's sick. So now you've got a guy that you have really no idea if you can trust on that side, right?
But shout out to that guy, Cole Van Lannon. Shout out to him.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, so I get why Mac might have been a little bit more sped up to begin with in that football game. But hey, that's one thing, I guess, guys, we can't really sleep on too much. That Tennessee defense, with the exception of like last week against Washington, has actually been really good this year. Like, at one time, halfway through the year, they were the number 1 defense yardage-wise, I think, in the league.
Which is insane, because their offense does them zero favors, it seems like sometimes.
Exactly.
Like, well, I mean, with all due respect, I don't think Will Levis is the guy. I get he's been kind of a roller coaster, but I mean, you have to go at least in the draft, right? Next year, do you look for somebody different, or do you roll with him for another year?
I think so. I'll tell you what, Austin, I'm not sure from a Tennessee standpoint if he's the guy or even Callahan's the guy. Like, it's some weird stuff going on right there in year number 1 for both of those guys. And it looked like Levis was starting to play pretty good football. There was a time in that game, and I can't remember exactly when it was, but I remember leaning over and saying, he almost threw it to a Jags player directly. They were back on their own like 15-yard line, 18-yard line. And they're going, well, press box would have been right to left, so I'm not sure which direction it would be for TV. But I mean, he has some time, and it's like he was about to throw it to an outlet guy. And he looks to his right, and the only guy out there is a Jags player. And it was just kind of holding the contained part of the defenses, I guess. But there wasn't a Tennessee player in sight. And I'm telling you could see it. If I go back and find this play, because it was like he almost threw it to the Jags player.
The wrong guy.
Because he thought that was like his outlet guy. And he would have thrown it right to like Savage or something like that. Instead, he checked it down on the other side of the play. So, I mean, he didn't do it. But for a moment, at least real time, I was like, he almost just threw it right to the Jets, because he's had some goofy stuff go on this year.
Welcome back to the Brent and Austin Show, streaming on the Action Sports Jax 24/7 network.
Hamby, leave him alone, man. What are you doing? Hamby, leave Mac Jones and his turtleneck alone. What are you doing, bro? Come on, Hamby. You're better than that, man. Bro, can you believe that?
I couldn't help myself.
Dude looked it up and everything on the internet, must have.
Austin.
What happened? What's going on? I can't believe you must have a lot of free time in your hands, Sammy. Man.
I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
No, you're good, bro. You're good.
Welcome back to the Brent and Austin Show. I had nothing to do with that. Just want to let everybody know.
Well, it's just like, why was he wearing shoulder pads?
I don't think so.
Was he like an 80s businesswoman with the shoulder pads? Like, it's why it came up so much?
You're going to have to
know.
leave. Austin, you better leave this alone or people are going to start to think that you might have had something to do with that in the commercial break.
I don't know what you're talking about, man.
Where did the Friday Fit segment go to? I mean,
Hey.
we should really do this with the Jags.
For sure.
That
All
would
right.
maybe take the top of the list.
Here we go.
Monday morning quarterback time, driven by your local Hyundai dealers. There's joy in every journey. And you know what? There's a lot of joy in a guy by the name of Jarian Jones. I just tweeted this out and said, if you ranked players week to week, right? And you know, we do all sorts of things when you cover a football team the way you cover the Jags, and you know, arrow up, arrow down, stock up, stock down, all these kind of different things that you come up with. And if you did that week to week, holy cow, there wouldn't be a guy that probably jumped up more this year at any week than Jarian Jones has in the last 8 days. And I kind of like this player anyway. His personality coming out of camp, the player he was at Florida State. I think people like the pick in the third round, quite honestly. And he's been playing quietly. I think he's played pretty good football. But then last week with the Trevor hit, he gets ejected. And it means something. It meant something, especially after the remarks that he got ejected. It said something to the fans. I think it said something to us, Austin, as well. And then he backs that up with what I thought was a really good conversation on Wednesday when we were down there in the building about, I remember thinking about just how much this guy hates losing. And he didn't care about the fine. And he didn't want to get ejected. He's got to learn from that, he said. He tried to take the mature route there. But he said, I'll back up any of my guys any day. He's the guy you want to go down the alley with in a street fight. But it really has stung him, it looks on his face, that they keep losing. And then you take Sunday. And what he was able to do yesterday, I just thought I saw 22 all over the football field. They blitz him. It was a really nice rush, by the way, to get to Will Levis. Some pass breakups. He did have the one pass interference, but I just thought 22 was all over the place. I don't think there's another player in the eyes of the fan base that has jumped up more in a week this season than Jarian Jones just did over the last 8 days.
Yeah, dude's stock is absolutely skyrocketing for two reasons. Number one, the play on the field that we've seen. But now also just the attitude and the demeanor that he brings as well. And this is a guy that seems to, you know, number one, have his brother's back, as he alluded to, but number two, like, knows what it means, you know, to put the jersey on, to put the helmet on and represent the Jaguars, I guess you would say. And I get a lot of that can be, you know, some bad things in the past couple of years, but like I like a guy who's coming in saying, I hate losing. I don't like, you know, being disrespected by a different team, and goes about his business the proper way. And I think you need more Jarian Joneses on your team. I think if you had more Jarian Joneses on your team, things might look different this year. So I love the play. I love the mentality. And I like, once again, a younger guy, much like Brian Thomas Jr., that you can build on now going into the future.
Yeah, really look at that game, and you're looking at two rookies and Tank Bigsby, who had big plays in that football game. You start really looking around. I don't know if this is the Jags trying to save face a little bit here with this regime and trying to be like, well, look at all these young guys we got. Mason Smith led the defensive tackles once again in the interior, so he's playing more the last couple of weeks. I'm really a big fan of Monteric Brown, and maybe I'm too much of a fan of Monteric Brown, but they finally got him on the field, Austin. And I thought he did some nice things too. I think he's a good player that I really feel like, and with all due respect to Darby, I think I don't mind him on the field over Darby. And I thought you saw more of that yesterday as well. Jack's starting to shift things up a little bit. Andre Cisco was not out there on the first play of the game. Now, he was in there quite a bit during the game, but Antonio Johnson was getting more looks. Dewey Wingard was even there at safety. So the Jags are trying some things, but I think the overall thought is, hey, Bigsby's shown some nice things this year. Brian Thomas Jr. obviously doing his thing. A guy like Jarian Jones is doing his thing. Trayvon Walker, these younger players, you do have players. You do have a court. We're not wrong about that. I asked the question last week, are we stupid? Did we really miss this? Did we whiff on this, that the Jags are 2-10 at the time and they have this kind of talent? And the answer, I guess, is no. Now, do they have enough talent? That's a fair question. But the bottom line is I think they do have talent to work with. Whoever is going to lead this thing going into the offseason and into 2025, they've got a core group of players and even some younger players that you can kind of build around and add to and maybe flip it pretty quick, Austin.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of have this conversation now since the losing streak started, where do you have the talent to compete, or is it just the lack of, elevating the talent and teaching the talent the right way? And I think, we've seen some young talent showcase now where it leads you to believe, okay, well, maybe is this more just on coaching or the message not getting through? So, yeah, I think you do like, your base of guys that you have going forward. Obviously, you got to pick and choose some more guys coming forward from the draft, and I'm not sure how much you address in free agency, but there is some promising things to take away from it, right? Like, I get it. The game yesterday probably wasn't the most entertaining, especially if you watched any other football game on Sunday. But once again, the silver lining is, well, at least some guys came to play, and at least some guys kind of, shined a little bit, where if you're a Jaguars fan, you feel better going forward.
Hey, one more Jags thought here for a moment, okay? And I want to switch over to some college football stuff because of the playoff, and there's some news out potentially on Carson Beck too. Obviously you got the eye source. It's a tough. Hang with me here for a moment. The Jags defense has been awful this year overall. Statistically, they're terrible. But are they finding something, Austin, for the most part, over the last month or so? If you go back to like the Eagles game, the Vikings game where they held them to 12 points. Now the Lions game was just so bad in the middle of that, I mean, you're going to have to just put that out of your mind. But the Texans game.
It's tattooed. How can I?
I know it. And now this one. But I mean, really, if you take 4 out of the last 5 based on how they've played most of this year, doesn't it feel like they're doing a lot more good things on defense? They still will do some bad things. Like the Texans game was a great example of that. On a 3rd and 10, they just don't go cover Schultz, and he's there walking to the end zone. Like, that's their problem. They can't get all of it tied up. Now, they did Sunday. But I just feel like – I'm not trying to sit here and praise Nielsen. I just feel like they have figured some stuff out over the last month. It still just hasn't been enough, with the exception of that Lions game where they just got crushed.
Yeah, I mean, I think, they definitely showcased their skill set against the Titans. The Vikings as well, when we saw yesterday, if you watch that Vikings game, is an offensive juggernaut. Yeah, I mean, maybe they have turned a little bit of a corner, but once again, like, I'm not, I'm going to give them the props. They essentially won the game yesterday. So give them their flowers, give them their props. But I'm also going to say, I'm not sure if the Titans offense is really one to be fearful of. Now, you're going to play a Jets team that, I think Aaron Rodgers threw his first 300-yard game in a century, it seems like. Yeah, forever. And you have Devontae Adams, and you have some other good wide receivers as well. Wilson is going to, I think, be a go. So you're going to be tested a little bit. And by the way, I get that Breece Hall's out, but you have a running back in Braylon Allen who just likes to lower his shoulder and deliver punishment, a la Tank Bigsby. So you're going to have, I don't want to say your hands full, but it's going to be a challenge at least when New York comes here. So you're going to get a better feel for what this defense can possibly be.
And you look at that Minnesota game yesterday, and then you go back to a month ago, Sam Darnold obviously 24-38 with 3 picks. Justin Jefferson had 5 catches for 48 yards, and Addison had 2 catches for 25. Mm-hmm. And watching them play yesterday, you're just like, well, how did the Jaguars hold them? And they deserve credit. You got to retrack and be able to, based off of what the Vikings have done even since then, those guys have been eating against almost every other team, and the Jags found a way to give up 12 points, even though they were, the Vikings were playing good football at the time.
It was the worst performance of the year by the Vikings. They had 20 points against the Rams in a loss. Their other loss, they had 29 against the Lions. And even in some wins, they've had as low as 23 points. I see it. So, like, it was the best performance, against the Vikings offense almost by far. And that's the weird thing. And Austin, how do you characterize it then? Because they have had some of those. Like, the Miami performance was very good defensively outside of, like, 2 plays. It was really good to start the year. Yesterday, Titans offense stinks, but the bottom line, it was good. Then you have the Vikings won. I actually think they did do a good job against Philly, and really both times against Houston for the most part. In Houston, they give up the touchdown at the end because, the Jags couldn't finish off a game. But then some of their games that they've had are just embarrassing. The Lions game, the 4th quarter against the Colts, the Chicago game. They basically gave half of the stats for the year to Caleb Williams in that game in London. So it's a really weird thing to put your head around the gap of how good they've been at times, or can be, some of their potential, and just how porous they can be. I don't know what that says. Like, I have a hard time figuring out how to draw a conclusion from that.
I mean, to me, well, it's kind of what came first, the chicken or the egg. Because if you go back to the Vikings game, yeah, they held them to, it might have been a season low total, but if you remember how that game went, Minnesota had the ball for like 42 minutes, and they had over 400 yards of offense. Now, the red zone defense for the Jaguars came into play. I think Sam Darnold had 3 interceptions that game, or else the game could have been a lot worse than what it was. So, I'm not sure if this Jaguars defense is the real deal in terms of they're showing up, they're getting better. I think you could agree with that for sure. But also, I think the defense needs bad quarterback play to make that happen. I'm not sure this Jaguars defense is good enough where they can influence the turnovers. They can influence offenses to play bad. I think more it's, okay, they need offenses to kind of make mistakes and then they can capitalize on them. And that's what Sam Darnold did, obviously. And that's what the Eagles did a little bit, too, on that Trayvon Walker touchdown.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's a good reminder, by the way, of that game. I kind of had forgotten about the time of possession. And that happened in the Philly game, too. The time of possession was really big. Now, some of that's on your offense.
No, for sure.
And like, that's the one thing about like Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen, they really could be having good seasons if this team could be in front in the fourth quarter. They're just never in front. And that helps a pass rusher big time if you've got a touchdown lead or a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. And they're already tracking to maybe finish the season in double-digit sacks, but they might even have 3 or 4 more if the team was good and in the lead. The one problem with this Jags defense, well, there's been a lot of problems with this Jags defense, and I'm trying to find out. I can't even remember how many turnovers they've got now this year. But it was another game yesterday. They didn't get a turnover. They just don't get a lot of turnovers. And before that Minnesota game, they were on a historically bad pace in terms of turnovers for a season, which I think their franchise worst is like 9 turnovers for the year. And I mean, they're right around there. They're not great in that category. So, but they were that day, to your point about the Minnesota Vikings. I just don't, I guess what I sit here and think about on their defense is just, again, how statistically bad they are, that if they were just somewhat consistent and in the middle of the league, you'd feel like the Jags would have won a few more games this year. Now, you could say the same about the offense. This is not to let the offense off the hook. I just think we've almost seen more signs of the defense showing flashes of being pretty good than we've actually seen of the offense showing signs of it being pretty good. And so when you go into this offseason, it's like, what do you need player-wise? Like, again, the linebackers feel like they're playing okay, Austin, to me. I know Devin Lloyd gets a lot of crap, but he feels like he's playing pretty good. Ventrell Miller, obviously Foye. I think Tyson's a good corner. I think Jarian Jones is a bright future. I think Savage has played pretty good in spots, maybe inconsistent, but pretty good in spots. You've got 2 edge guys. Does this go all the way back to the middle of that defense? They just need to be a lot better on defense, or does it say they just need a lot better coaching if they're going to figure this thing out, because they're only a couple of players away from having maybe a pretty good defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes hand in hand, right? But at the end of the day, and we've spoken this before a little bit, it all starts with the interior. It all starts with the trenches. And I think great teams in this NFL, the teams that are going to the playoffs, they have great trenches. They have great interior defense, and they have great offensive line. And I think the Jaguars right now, while they are young and they're still improving, it remains to be seen if they can be a dominant, elite interior defense.
Hamby, what do you think? You give them an elite interior defensive player, and that's what you're missing? Is it as simple as that, or is it deeper than that?
I mean, how many sacks do we have from interior defensive linemen this year?
I think the stat that will blow your mind is that the 3rd leading sack getter on this football team is still Roy Robertson Harris, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, if that's true, that tells you all you need to know. That tells you all you need to know.
The prosecution rests, bro.
Yeah. Why does Josh Allen only have how many? 6.5, 7 sacks?
7. He's got 7, and
Trayvon has 8.5.
Trayvon's got 8.5. Yeah.
Hey, why? Because they get 0 interior push. They have to win every one-on-one for every sack they get. And obviously, yes, your point about how they're never playing from ahead. They never get to pin their ears back on 3rd downs from opposing teams trying to make a comeback. That's all. That's it right there. How many times have we talked about where our defensive lineman is making a tackle facing forward at the 5-yard mark from the line of scrimmage, meaning that he's just gotten pushed back that far? It's happy. Tony Pollard came out, and what did he do yesterday?
Oh, dude, I thought we're gonna see a Tony Pollard 200-yard game. Honestly,
guys, that first drive was bad. Yeah,
my buddy asked me for one prop pick, yesterday. I didn't place money on it, but he asked me, and I said Tony Pollard over yards. He had 58 or like 60% of that number in the first drive, and it was obviously 7 straight. They didn't do anything special. They just ran it right up the middle, inside zones and stuff like that, and we couldn't stop it.
Yeah, they ran the ball 9 out of 10 times on that drive, and in typical like Tennessee fashion, by the way.
Why did you not go for it?
Just kicked a field goal on 4th and 2 when you're 3 and 10, like or 2, whatever they are. Like that was dumb play. But yeah, I don't know. And here's the deal: they're starting to admit mistakes, aren't they, guys? Like Ryan Nielsen's finally what he did in that Minnesota game was he changed. He's like, I'm not going to be stubborn and do what we do. We're going to change. We're going to show that cloud coverage. We don't do a lot of that, but we're going to do it because Darnold doesn't play well against it. So he shifted, and it worked. And then on top of that, they have started to say, okay, we're going to get Darby off the field. We're going to get Monteric Brown on a bit more. We are not going to be stubborn on this Armstead stuff, not to maybe where he plays, but how much he plays. He continues to just play like 30 snaps a game. I think he was 33 yesterday.
33 yesterday, which is half.
Guys, for the amount of money you're paying him, Austin, like you would play him more than that, you would think, right? But are they admitting mistakes that they've made and not getting stuck on it finally to get younger guys in, maybe to save their own butt, really, but also to just say, hey, we're better off with this lineup in instead of these guys that were invested in, and we whiffed. We swung and missed.
No, without a doubt, because trying to prove a point and save face is one thing, but trying to win football games is another thing, right? And you have to put the best guys out there. I think it does say a lot in terms of how the rotation's going. Now, you have the luxury of trying to maneuver a little more because you're not really playing for a lot, so you can do that. But yeah, I think it speaks volumes in terms of if you look at the playing time.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a double-edged sword. You go back to this rotation stuff, and I mean, I can fall guilty to it as well. I like seeing some of these young guys come along and play, and I think you're seeing it. I think part of their mission to get these guys involved, you do see actual signs of it. There are things to point to, but we also kind of believe that this messing around with the rotation and all this stuff also might have put you in a bad spot to begin with. Because there's no consistency out there. And you were rotating too much with guys like Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker at the start of this thing, trying to figure it out. So I think in one way it's backfired. And in another way, it's kind of showcasing, hey, the Jags do have some players that might be impactful for them in years to come. And that's one of the things that Shad Khan, by the way, in all of this, or Doug, whoever, they're going to have to figure this out. And what does that mean? And I mean, this isn't a conversation for are these guys coming back or not, but I think that's what muddies it up a little bit right now. Like Jarian Jones coming along, Brian Thomas coming along, like that is actually praise for the coaching staff in the front office. But 3 and 10s certainly isn't enough to praise.
No, it's definitely enough to praise, but also I don't like the praise coming from when you almost scolded a guy for the previous week for, throwing a punch or whatever like that, so. Yeah. But at the end of the day, promise, Brent, hope. That's all we can talk about today is hope. And I think with Jarian Jones, you see it. I think with this interior defensive line, you see glimpses, but can you rely on it for a full season next year? I'm not sure yet.